Uh, Good afternoon, everybody. Today, in our introductory presentation session on comparative literature studies, a group of four students are going to make a presentation on one research article. Today, we'll have Bhumi, Krupali, Smruti, and Tanvi making a presentation on Subha Chakraborty Dasgupta's article on comparative literature in India. The article is about an overview of the history of comparative literature in India. So let us have an introductory presentation by the group of students. You can start now. We are not able to get your voice. Yeah. Check the microphone. Yeah.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Tanvi Mehra. Today our group dealing with comparative literature in India, an overview of its history, article by Subha Chakraborty Dasgupta. Table of content, abstract. This essay traces the trajectory of comparative literature in India, focusing primarily on Jadavpur University, where it began in 1956, and the University of Delhi's Modern Indian Languages Department, beginning with Rabindranath Tagore's vision of world literature, Vishwa Sahitya. The discipline evolved from colonial British influences toward a decolonizing process that emphasized the creativity and cross-cultural literary relations. The study explores how Indian literature gradually gained promises alongside Southern Hemisphere literature, shifting from influence studies to reception and transformation analysis, while engaging with marginalized species and establishing non hierarchical literary relationships across diverse cultural traditions. Then, introduction. Comparative literature in India grew from the country's natural multilingual environment where ideas and stories easily move across languages such as Sanskrit, Bengali, Tamil, Persian, and Arabic. By the late 19th century, translation activity increased in Bengal, and writers like Satyendra Nath Dutt encouraged building joyful literary connection with the world. Rabindranath Tagore's 1907 lecture on Vishwa Sahitya, where he linked world literature with the idea of comparative study, become a major inspiration for the establishment of the first department of comparative literature at Jadavpur University in 1956. Over the decades, Indian scholars shaped the field through inter-Indian literary comparison, translation work, reception studies, and effort to decolonize literary education, making comparative literature a dynamic and culturally rooted discipline in India. Then about author Subha Chakraborty Das Gupta. Subha Chakraborty Das Gupta is a leading scholar of comparative literature in India. She is currently a visiting professor at the University of Delhi. Earlier, she was a professor at the Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. She also coordinated the special assistant program and led a major project in translation and comparative studies from 2007 to 2012. She served as the editor of the Jadavpur Journal of Comparative Literature. She has international teaching experience at the Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. She was the secretary of the Comparative Literature Association of India for 2 terms. She was a part of an international research team on mapping. Mapping multilingualism. Her important works include a bibliography of reception of world literature in Bengali periodicals and edited volumes like literary studies in India, and genealogy and of Asian lands. Then research framework, research problem. How has comparative literature as a discipline developed in India from colonial framework to decolonize the indigenous perspectives? What paradigm shift occurred in methodologies, and how did the discipline engage with Indian literatures and marginalized voices? Objectives: to trace the historical development of comparative literature in India from 1907 to present, to examine the shift from colonial literary frameworks to decolonizing processes, to analyze methodological transition from influence studies to reception theory, to document the integration of Indian literature, marginalized voices, and inter-Asian connections. Methodology: historical critical approach, chronological analysis of institutional development, document analysis, examination of syllabi, curricula, and published research, comparative analysis, study of different centers like Jadavpur, Delhi, and South India. Personal experience, author's involvement as the faculty and coordinator of programs, review of publication journal and conference proceeding. Then key finding: the discipline began with poet founders emphasizing creativity alongside scholarship. A shift from influence to reception theory challenge colonial power dynamics. Indian multilingualism necessitated interliterary translation without English mediation. Literature was the reposition as the knowledge system to secure institutional legitimacy. Inter-Asian literary relations remain largely unexplored despite their historical significance. My learning outcomes: I understand how comparative literature developed in India before it became a formal discipline. I also identify how Buddhadev Bose and modern Bengali poets contributed to decolonizing literary studies, and I also understand the epistemology of comparison, how I study text across cultures, history, and traditions, and I explore how scholars evaluated canon formation, multilingual histories, oral tradition, and regional literature. I learned that how comparative literature in India engages with African, Latin American, Canadian, and Asian literature for a broader global perspective. And I explore how scholars re-evaluated canon formation, multilingual histories, oral tradition, and regional literature. So this was from my side. Now I would like to invite Smruti for further information.
Hello, everyone. Very good afternoon. So, today I'm dealing with key points, key arguments, and the historical background given in the article. So, in key points, first is historical foundation that comparative literature in India was established at Jadavpur University in 1956, but its roots go back to 1907 when Tagore has delivered his famous speech on Vishwa Sahitya or world literature. That beautiful thing about Tagore's vision is that he he didn't see the world literature as a competition between nations, but as a community of artists working together to build something collectively. And this was a collaborative spirit, and this collaborative spirit became the foundation of the particular discipline in India. So, second is decolonizing vision. The founders like Buddha Dev Bose uh, consciously moved away from British colonial literary frameworks by translating the works of French ancient Indian texts like Kalidas's Meghdootam, that initiated a subtle decolonizing process in the study of comparative literature in India. Then third is a creativity centered approach. It is a unique thing that about Indian comparative literature, that it did not just produce scholars, but it has produced poets and critics. The first five students of the department of comparative literature in India at Jadavpur University. Of first five, the three became the poets, and one became a distinguished critic that established the creative writing as a central of comparative studies. And it didn't make it a separate like Western academic traditions do. The fourth is paradigm shifts. The methodology evolved significantly. The initially scholars looked for influences in the works, like we can say, did Shakespeare influence the Indian drama or other things? The influence was seen by scholars at first, but this approach was problematic because it assumed a one way flow from the west to the rest. And so the field shifted to studying reception and transformation, that how did Indian readers actively reshape what they received. And this shift is particularly important in post-colonial context where agencies matters. Last is interdisciplinary expansion. Contemporary comparative literature engages with marginalized spaces, oral traditions, performance studies, diaspora studies, and interfaces with neighboring Asian countries, establishing non hierarchical connectivity across cultures. Key arguments of the article: the Indian literature as comparative literature. The author argues that studying Indian literature is inherently comparative, because India is multilingual with contiguous linguistic spaces. For example, Bengal shares history with Assam and Odisha, and Bihar languages, and these literatures overlaps each other naturally. As Ejaz Ahmed, whom the author quotes, as says, we need to trace the dialectic of unity and difference. That what does this mean? And it means that finding both what connects this literature and what makes them distinct, grounding this in actual historical and material conditions, not abstract theories. Second is a rejection of universality. The juxtaposition of different literary canons from the beginning led to questioning universalist European canons. Older Sanskrit centric definitions were abandoned in favor of inclusive approaches, recognizing the oral, performative, and marginalized traditions. Third is reception over influence. This is crucial in a sense that the colonial tendency was to always look for Western influences on Indian literature. And like I said, that did Shakespeare influence the Indian drama or something like that? But this frames India as a passive receiver in this study. And the reception theory flips this and asks that what did Indian readers do with Wordsworth, and how Wordsworth and Shakespeare and other authors and influences from West, and how did they transform it according to their own cultural and Indian cultural needs, and the receiver, not the emitter, is in focus. Gives an agency back to the colonized culture. Fourth is literature as knowledge system. When humanities funding was decreasing, the department had to justify its existence, and they argued that literature is not just entertainment or cultural decorations, but it's a knowledge system with its own ways of knowing. For example, oral traditions of tribal communities contain the knowledge about crops and varieties of rices, soil, seasons, and shows the knowledge system in oral traditions also in comparison to the scientific ways. Last is inter-Asian connectivity. So the article emphasizes the urgent need to study literary relations between India and neighboring Asian countries and untouched area to uncover different pathways of creative communications and establish meaningful South and South Asian dialogues beyond Eurocentric frameworks. So historical beginnings, the Tagore's vision. As mentioned, in 1907, Rabindranath Tagore gave a lecture at the National Council of Education on Vishwa Sahitya or world literature, and this wasn't just about reading books from around the world. Tagore had a deeply humanistic vision and he said that world literature should be like a building constructed by a community of artists working together. And the metaphor was not a competition, not hierarchy, but the collective, collaborative, and collective construction of the literatures from across the world. Uh, that Another is founding of the Jadavpur University Department of Comparative Literature. So in 1956, it was founded with founders like Buddhadev Bose, a modern Bengali poet and translator of Baudelaire and Holdring, like French and other poets. They founded department, and he brought scholars like Sudindranath Datta and to teach, establish poetry and translation as a central to the discipline. Naresh Guha later became the chairperson for 2 decades, and he emphasized the department's role in fostering an intensely creative environment. Evidence of impact in history, that the impact was remarkable. Like I have mentioned that from first five, the three became the poet and one became the uh, distinguished critic, and it create the impact across all over the India. And the Jadavpur Journal of Comparative Literature also created an impact through the it was launched in 1961, and by becoming an important venue for literary studies in India. So my personal learning outcome, I learned that to decolonize my approach to comparative literature by questioning that Eurocentric frameworks and moving beyond influence based thinking about the literature. I realized that reception is an active process where cultures reshape what they receive rather than passively adopting foreign ideas. I understood the importance of reading texts in their original languages, because comparisons become more authentic without English mediation. I learned that the oral traditions, folk narratives, and performance cultures are meaningful knowledge systems that deserve equal academic attention as scientific and research-based uh, uh, studies. I discovered that the significance of South-South literary connections links with Africa, Asia, Latin America, which remain understudied. I recognized the comparative work must be non-hierarchical and respecting all cultures without establishing superiority of one. I became aware that academic choices are political, and they include marginalized voices like tribal literatures that helps challenge the dominant structures in with the hierarchies. I learned that creative writing and literary scholarship complement each other, and that both enrich my understanding of literature in one or other way. And I committed I now I am committed to seeking non-western connections in my future studies, and to valuing diverse literary traditions beyond the western canon. So this was from my side. Now I would like to call Bhumi Mahida for further information.
So thank you, Tanvi and Smruti, for the essential information. Now I'm dealing with the core content. That first is the comparison. The early methodology, the 1956 syllabus placed strong emphasis on a comparative study across culture and periods. So at that time, key comparative modules included like Iliad and Ramayana as a parallel epic traditions, and Sanskrit and Greek drama examined through Aristotle's Poetics and Bharata's Natya Shastra. So European literature from ancient to modern periods read alongside Sanskrit and Bengali literary traditions. This structure highlighted multiple literary systems, simultaneously marking the foundation of comparative thinking. That purpose of these things, the aim was not to prove similarity alone, but to use similarity difference as analytical tools. And the differences revealed cultural values, literary aesthetics, and ideological frameworks central to each traditions. That comparative study built a network of relationship on a various levels. So encouraging cross-culture understanding rather than a hierarchy. So, as Radhakrishnan notes, bring into existence a new object or subject of knowledge. It means that comparison generated reflection without creating a new object of study, instead forming relational knowledge through comparison. Then the Indian literature turn the time period 1970s to 1990s, and the role of Delhi universities, a major shift took place when Indian literature became a center field of comparison. And the 1974 in this year post MA course in comparative Indian literature introduced by the Modern Indian Languages Department. And the 1994 a full-fledged MA program in comparative Indian literature established. And this move positions Indian literatures at the core rather than the periphery, reshaping comparative methodology. And the methodological challenges, that what kind of challenges at that time that comparison now had to restructure approach by to rejecting Sanskrit only models that previously defined Indian literature, and the including oral and performative forms, not only written colonial text, and recognizing multilingualism, linguistic overlap, and shared histories, and then addressing elite versus marginalized voices, highlighting representation, and studying intermediate exchanges and cross-border literary interactions, acknowledging movement of forms across region and traditions. And then we have the reception studies, the problem with influence. As sir mentioned in this lecture, that French school have the idea of influence. Then traditional scholarship often emphasizes Western influence on Indian literature, especially under colonial frameworks. Then reception studies shifted focus toward the receiver's agency, not the source. And instead of asking what India borrow, scholars examine how India received, adapted, and transformed foreign text based on a culture needs. This approach reduced dependence on Eurocentric influence narratives. Then the case study of romanticism in a Bengal, that how kind of they believe in romanticism in Bengal. So Burns and Wordsworth were enthusiastically received for their serenity, simplicity, and inner strength, aligning with Indian classical aesthetics. And romantic angst and excessive emotion turmoil were as unsuitable. That Shelley and Byron were sometimes criticized for sentimentality, yet later admired for their themes of freedom and rebellion, especially during the independence movement. This demonstrates that reception and political context, and confirming that readers reshape meaning according to their own values and sociocultural movements. Okay, and these are my personal learning outcomes, describing how Indian comparative studies shifted from influence based methods to reception and cross cultural studies. Interpret example of literary reception, especially how Bengal responded to romanticism differently across time. Evaluate how comparative literature promotes non-hierarchical cross-cultural literary relations, and apply comparative methods to analyze text from different language, regions, and cultural traditions, and cultivate sensitivity towards marginal, oral, and regenerative. And at the last, develop capacity for research involving translation studies, intercultural interactions, and oral literature documentation. For the further information, I would like to invite Krupali Belam.
So I dealing with the core content of the article. So the expansion and area studies from 1980 to 2000. So Southern Hemisphere focus. Gabriel Gracias, his work 100 Year of Solitude entered in the syllabus of during that time, which alongside African and Latin American literatures motivated by questions of solidarity, desire to understand and resist oppression. So at that time in syllabus they also added this African and Latin American literatures. Then area studies center. So Jadavpur established Center of African, Latin American, Canadian, and Bangladesh literature studies. However, the author notes this lead to a division of scarce resources and diverted attention from systematic work on Indian literature and neighboring Asian countries. National growth departments emerged across India in 1980 and 19 at the time. This 1980 and 1990, there are many departments are established in India, like this Trivandrum, Madurai, Pondicherry, Punjabi University in Patiala, and JNU University. In this university, this Department of Comparative Studies established, and two national associations merged in 1992 to form of Comparative Literature Association of India with 1000 plus members. Then contemporary direction, literature is a knowledge system. To justify humanities funding, the Center of Advanced Studies demonstrated that literature's way of knowing were different but equally valid. Oral tradition were studies for sustainable alternative to urban lifestyle. That literature is not they not compare it as other fields of studies like as science, but it literature deals with humanities, human emotions, and voice of the people, and their ethics and all these things. The marginalized communities, the vanishing seeds of culture project documented folk culture from association with rice varieties in Bankura, West Bengal. Dalit literature was incorporated, though a lot remains to be done pedagogically. At that time, this rice varieties project is evolved. That, however, rice varieties in Bankura are not they are not harvesting this as much. So where they harvesting this rice, variety of rice is at that time they sing oral their traditional songs and that time. So however time passes, this all gets very low during that time. So they are so this project's aim is to sustain these all things, preserve them, these rice varieties before they lost. So this suggests that this Dalit literature was also same like that they also entered this Dalit literature in their studies. So inter-Asian studies, so research on literary relation between India and neighboring countries revealed that continuity and constant interaction between each other since ancient times. Project included Bengal-Burma connection, Perso-Arabic interfaces, and Southern Korean Japanese literature studies. Then translation and cultural studies. So translation studies integration almost all comparative literature departments now included translation studies. Jadavpur conducted 8 literary translation workshops, and without the mediation of English, uncommon at that time, the Center for Translation of Indian Literature was established. Cultural studies courses examine intermediately changing marginalities, subcultures, nationalism, globalization, sexualities, and identity politics. One course studies performs not as an art form but as a mean to study social behavior pattern. Despite interdisciplinary, literature continues to occupy the central spaces. Conclusion. So, key insights are comparative literature in India evolved from Tagore's humanistic vision. Contribution to the field. The Indian experience demonstrate how comparative literature can center not European literature. Questions universalist canon, emphasize reception over influence, and established what Kumkum Sangaris calls co-construction based on stubble and complex histories of translation, curriculation, and extraction. Future directions. The primary task of construction of literary histories in terms of literary relations among neighboring region has perhaps yet to begin. While the founding vision to nurture and foster creativity continues as a subterranean force limitation, the author honestly acknowledges that a lot remain to be done, particularly in constructing comprehensive literary histories of neighboring Asian region and systematically amalgamating data on Indian literature. Inter-Asian literary relations remain largely untouched. Systematically study of India connect with China, Southeast Asia, Burma, and other neighbors has perhaps yet to begin despite their historical significance. My learning outcome is that I understand Rabindranath's role of I. Tagore's idea of Vishwa Sahitya. Earlier, I saw comparative literature as a technical or academic field, but this article helped me to understand a larger human vision behind it. Tagore imagined a world literature as a shared human community built by artists together, and I also understand that comparative literature promotes non-hierarchical literary relationships. It encourages us to look at text beyond national boundaries and values marginalized and oral tradition. The article was dense and academic. I felt that overwhelmed by its long paragraphs and theoretical explanation on my first reading. Then I also learned how comparative literature connect with translation studies and cultural studies. This broadened my understanding of field not just as a comparison between texts, but study acknowledges system, culture, identity, and social structures. So these are the references, and thank you.
Okay, so we have 2 questions on this. First, we have by Rutvi to Smruti. Yes, Rutvi, you can ask your question.
Smruti, my question is oral tradition are inherently fluid and lack the fixity of written text. How does the article justify positioning them as the legitimate knowledge system alongside scientific knowledge?
So, the oral traditions are inherently fluid and they lack the fixity of written text, but it is it is the strength of it instead of its weakness, as the oral traditions had the knowledge which is used by people, and the people, as I mentioned, that folk songs carried the knowledge about crops and soils and varieties of it. So it is the idea of that the folk songs and the oral tradition literatures carried the knowledge in it, but it lacks the fixity in it, as the scientific knowledge needs the evidence, but it also changes with new evidence, arrival of new evidences. So in the article also, there is the project of vanishing seeds in culture, that also shows us that how the oral traditions and scientific knowledge are can work alongside each other, and it gives the idea that oral traditions are also systematic knowledge systems. So this was from my side.
+9 116 003.
So, Bhumi, as you mentioned, Bengali reception of romanticism changing over time. But doesn't this make literally study unstable? If meaning keeps changing, then where is the objective truth?
Um, we are different times read the same text differently, right? So it doesn't mean that there is no truth. Reception study says that meanings come from both text and the reader's historical context. So it obviously that interpretations are changed, and for instance, Bengali readers saw peace in the Wordsworth and revolution in a Shelley, because that time their own time needed those kind of ideas. That is how the objective truth is that the text have a many meanings, and each period bring out a different one. So yes, this is from my side.
Okay, so that was the third article on comparative literature in India. And this article tries to summarize the history of various trends and even the academic history of comparative literature studies in India. All four of you brought a good summary of the article, also brought a very interesting learning outcomes from all this, that how uh, personally we get something to learn or understand comparative literature studies as a discipline, how it is being situated and what people do, what are the future scope of these studies also. There were good questions also, like on oral traditions and the reception. The oral traditions are very fluid, uh, but the first process that is required nowadays is to make it static by writing it. So anything that is still available only in oral. So Bankura district example is given. The same way in many rural spaces, still there might be several songs around several rituals. There was rice harvesting in West Bengal, and that example is discussed here. But the same way in throughout India, there might be several such rituals and very old songs which are sung by old people, but they are not written anywhere. They are not documented. So that also can be one of the projects to see that how it tries to help us in understanding the another concern. The another concern is climate change, ecology, climate change. So how the rural life and their songs, rituals can help us as an alternative life. Then that comparison can emerge from that about climate change and other things. So the first need is to document it, to write it, to record it, to convert it into digital form so other people can carry on with that work. The same way, this romanticism and how it keeps on changing, that's a very big question of reception, influence and reception. So in India, as there was this trend, the French school of thought of comparative studies about how people are influenced in different ways, that was seen. And obviously it has to be unstable. Literary meanings should not be stable. It can, if we want to go by for the plurality of reading, plurality of meaning, then one static stable symbol should not be imagined. It can be for a while, for one generation of the people, but then the new generation people might find another meaning also. That gives a very interesting scope of comparing how one text was read by a particular generation, and then after 50 years or 100 years, how the other people were reading. The example is also about Shakespeare, how Shakespeare is received in Bengali literature, in Parsi theater, in Gujarat. That all are the part that how we reread and receive the Renaissance text. Now the time is different, the different people are there, but still why they keep on getting some kinds of influence, or their imaginations are captured by some great writers of the past. Even the epic poems like Ramayana, Mahabharata, Iliad's poems, Homer's poems, that also keep on attracting the attention of the modern mind. But they change the meaning. They do not tell the story as it is. Something is added. We discussed last time the example of Frankenstein also, or like we discussed many times the examples of many historical movies, that how the history is being retold in the popular cinema. When it comes to the propaganda cinema, how the history is told, or when it comes to a different genre of love or revenge or forgiveness, how the same stories are told. Frankenstein, Del Toro's Frankenstein, we referred in context of the changing of the ending. Instead of revenge or killing, revenge, forgiveness is what the monster is thinking about. So the meaning of Mary Shelley is not stable. It is always changing, but the change is connected with new cultural dynamics. That's why this article also talks about cultural studies as a future avenue for comparative studies. Okay, we will continue our discussion in the classroom.